if I could, I'm going to ask Sergeant Major Miles this, go back to the day early when you first walked into the quarters and you had been assigned as a mission. Tell me how that process went. Who mentored you, and what was your first solo mission at the tomb like?
Okay, because I'm in my 60s now, I can't clearly, everything is cloudy, but I do remember Master Sergeant Mike Johnson at the time. And he was a character as well. You think that he was a piece of work. So I go down there and I'm nervous even then. And so I go down with him, I think three specific times I remember that. And you know about the tomb, the guards, but then I was really blown away and still how they're very meticulous on everything, even how they speak. And so I was nervous then, and I knew that fourth time I went, I was going to be alone. You're not really alone, but you're alone. I mean, your mentors are there, they're standing by, and that makes you even more stressed. And I'm there and I'm shaking, and I can remember even when I just rehearsing, practicing present arms, it feels like I was swatting flies because I was just so nervous. And in the tomb guard, it makes no difference if they're rank. Here I am. I think I was 86 at the time, and you got E4s, and so these guys were very intimidating. So I also learn about what they do at the actual tomb, and I see some of these guys sometimes at the exchange, you know, and then it was my mission from then to like try and get into their heads or loosen them up a bit. So that was a mission to me. What was your other question? I cannot remember the first mission. I'm not sure what country it was from.
No, that's fine. I just when you walk in the quarters the first time, I've heard this from numerous musicians. It's overwhelming. There's a lot of mystique about the tomb guards and what goes on, and then you get into the quarters behind closed doors. It's definitely different, and you are part of our family down in the quarters. It's not something that is really advertised, but the drummers and the buglers become part of our family because we work so closely together on a very specific mission. And when we're rendering honors, you can't help but have strong bonds, obviously, with someone that was there for quite a bit of time. So I appreciate the fact that your mentor was there. He watched over you for 3 missions before throwing you in the deep end of the pool. You were Tom's mentor. So Tom, how'd he do? Did he prepare you for that first day inside the quarters, or what?
Yes, he did. I remember pretty vividly our entire process. I remember that Miles kept, even though he can be, there's a lot of energy there, he can also play a lot of things very close. And I didn't know that he was considering me for that position. I had no idea. It was sometimes frankly, he could be hard to read, whether he liked me or didn't. I knew he liked me, but did he think I had what it took to succeed in the job? And I think every young musician worries about, they want to please their boss, and Miles was a great boss, and he was also. I walked into the band, and he was pretty legendary, and so there was a lot of, when he said, "Hey, I want you to go down," he said just like this. He's like, "I want you to go down to the tomb with me," and that was it. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew what it meant, and I knew what I hoped it meant. And I remember us walking there. And him having the drum, and he was in uniform, and I was, I think, in like a Class B, so I could just shadow him. And he looked at me, he held up the drum, he said, "This is God's instrument." And I was like, okay. I mean, yeah, it is. I mean, it is. And we walk down there, and we go into the quarters, and yes, I was blown away. I mean, the quarters has changed a lot over a generation or two. We've even seen it move off site so that they could redo where they are now. And he goes in there, and people instantly want to talk to him. They'll stop building up their shoes so they can kind of get a rap with Miles. And he knew how to keep everyone calm, and he basically didn't do much else except kind of just prepare himself mentally. He would stay out of the way if he needed to. He could tell when things were getting closer to time to go, which was really what I was there to learn. How do you pace yourself over a morning? How do you pace your emotions? How do you pace your warm up? How do you get yourself in the right mental place? And a lot of that I had to figure out. But watching him sort of negotiate all of that I was just trying to absorb it, because I'll say this till the day I die: the way Miles did it is the way I always want to do it. He was perfect, perfect. And I don't know how you joke and then you go do that, but there's some kind of way that he could do it. And I would watch him, and then the way he would help me, when we talked through all the steps, we talked through all the commands, of course, and he would coach me on how to look a certain way. And he helped me feel better about the fact that you're not going to be comfortable. And so I think that just setting up that expectation, like, listen, you might get out there and feel like you want to run as fast as you can away from those marks. But of course you can't. And then he would video me. He would do videotapes of me out there and then show them to me. Say, hey, and he was always very complimentary. Like, he knew that I was doing my best and that it was going to be a process for me too. And it was a long process. I mean, backing up Miles for 10 years probably took a couple of years off my life, because you did it very infrequently. You just had to be ready. And I always say to my kids, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And so just staying ready that whole time. And also, I couldn't screw up in the band. I couldn't screw up I needed to be ready if and when Miles was going to retire. And there was a lot of, it was not as easy as Tom's the guy. There were a lot of people that wanted that position. It was a very stressful early period to try to stay ready, and every opportunity I had to try to do my very best to make sure that this guy, my primary customer at this point, Miles Overton, was pleased with what I was doing. And he was always giving me good feedback. And I think he valued my feedback. He always asked me how he sounded. He'd say, hey, how was it? And I was always blown away. It was I'll close with this. He would always say, like, everyone thinks they want this until they're out there. And he's right. I would always be like, yeah, I would be in the band watching Miles, and I'd be like, yeah, I can't wait till it's my turn. And then it would be the time for him to play. And I would have this overwhelming feeling of being thankful that I wasn't about to play, that it wasn't me. I was like, Miles, and I knew Miles had it. And so it was a nice, slow kind of break-in period. My first mission was nerve-wracking when I was finally alone without him. It was very, very difficult. I think it was Ireland was the country, and it was in 2003. I still have the job sheet, and I'm way down on the roster list. It's strange. We have this roster list that goes in order of importance. It's actually order of rank, and I was at the bottom, and yet it's this, Del Olmo, it's a special drummer, and it was just this, this moment of like, well, here it comes, and it was great.
That's cool. For ceremonially wise, stepping onto the marks for the drummer and the bugler, it's not that complicated. We come in from the north side, enter through the chains, we go to our marks, we do our thing, we turn around and we walk off. It's relatively pretty simple. But when you're standing on the marks, you're playing a very specific piece of music. And Tom, if you could explain maybe the history behind, I'm going to screw it up, muffled ruffles or ruffled muffled. What is it, and why are we doing it?
It's muffled ruffles, and it's a part of the highest honors that we can add. It's technically honors to the dead. Honors to the nation comes from the band. So muffled ruffles and taps are part of that portion where we honor the tomb, essentially. The term muffled ruffles comes from ruffles and flourishes. So ruffles and flourishes, a lot of people know, we play them for presidents, and we play them for anywhere from 1 to 4 star generals. Technically, ruffles and flourishes are the brass and percussion parts separated. The ruffles are the percussion parts, and the flourishes are the brass parts, the parts that you would sing. So those drum rolls that accompany the brass are the ruffles. When you say ruffles and flourishes, what we do as drummers at the tomb, they're called muffled ruffles, because that means, in the British term, muffled means a drum without metal snares on the bottom. There's no snare drum. There's no snares on the bottom of the drum. So it's that tenor drum, that tom-tom drum sound, and that's why they're called muffled ruffles.
Interesting.
So
and how many notes? It's you play for a certain amount of time. Is that dictated by tradition? How many of what you play? You play a piece, then you pause and you go on, and there's so many of those before the trumpeter picks up their piece. Is that dictated in history as to why that many?
Miles, you have anything on why there's 4?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed everything. Yeah, muffled ruffles is the highest honors you can give any foreign dignitary. What was the question?
Why are why are there four? I'm not sure why
Yeah,
there are four.
it's almost like any four-star type general or the president. He gets the four of the ba-da-da, he gets four of those. So that's the highest you can give. So the actual four muffled, yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes I've been so terrified I couldn't remember. Is this the second one? Is it the third one? That's just how screwed up you can get there. So
Well,
yeah,
I
Tom,
guess the
good job.
yeah, and the good thing is that if you do five, the only people that are really gonna, I mean, you're gonna know and you're gonna be devastated. You're gonna go down in the quarters. You're gonna beat yourself up. I get that, but the rest of us ignorant non-musicians are gonna be like, oh man, that sounded cool.
You're not giving yourself credit. First of all, we're not going to talk about doing five. You don't you don't do five. Yeah,
No
you got
five,
the
no
people
three.
in the band that the tune guard know. There's people around that know. There's people that you work with every day, and I guarantee you, if anybody ever did five, they won't be seen again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it is one of those things. I distinctly remember being on the mat one day and being distracted as I'm changing the guard because there was a lady standing at the far end of the mat that caught my attention, and I forgot to call halt as I moved the new sentinel on. But because of the training and the rehearsals and the practice, we all stopped, we all heel clicked, I continued to move, and it wasn't until I get to the next part when I realized, oh, I forgot to call that, because the muscle memory had kicked in. So, and I'm gonna ask you this first, Miles, because obviously you're there. What kind of preparation would you go into to prepare yourself for going out onto the marks and doing the mission and coming off? Did you have a routine, or how did that look?
I did have a routine, and after I meticulously learned from the tune guards how to make my uniform almost perfect, because there's things that I learned from the tomb and I try to share them with Tom and people in the band. There was a time, and I joked around a lot because I was nervous as hell. And there was a right maybe minutes before I would, the first thing I would do was overdo my uniform over again, you know, and then I would pick something to actually practice on that would cause resistance to my fingers, because sometimes you're playing in gloves. I don't like playing in gloves, but you have to make it work. So I would pick right before that even happens. I would check with the actual tune guards and say, hey, how much time we have. Right before we go, maybe like 5 minutes, I would get somewhere to myself and just go over in my head. I would picture, image what I'm going to look like, look in the mirror, make sure you got your P's and arms correct, and get the blood in the hands going. Because once you're out there, sometimes you have to stand longer than you anticipate because the dignitaries are just not there. It could be cold, it's hot, just like the buglers. Sometimes with that mouthpiece, that's gold. You're actually talking putting a piece of metal to a piece of flesh, and so a lot of times they put the mouthpiece in their gloves with some hand warmers, and sometimes they're standing there. And so that to me is the hardest gig because that has to be just perfect tone wise. So that's how I would prepare myself. I wouldn't talk to anybody for about maybe 3 to 5 minutes. And then we actually go out before we actually go out on the mat and we talk it over again, as you know. And maybe I would tell like maybe one more joke, and that would be it from that point. Actually, step off. That would be it.
That's the
So
last one.
basically, I'm going over in my mind, and I have tunnel vision because as you're walking out, there's a lot of things that can distract you. I had a kid come out and grab my sticks once, right before we hit the mat, and I'm sitting there. Well, you can't. I didn't rehearse for this, you know. So yeah, mentally, I'm just in my head. I'm just picturing myself doing it, and that worked for me every time.
Okay. Tom, what was yours like? How'd you prep?
I Not much different. Usually, we're on a slightly different timeline than the band. In the morning, the band comes in and they have to rehearse the anthems. Usually, I like that time by myself to warm up. We have like a practice pad, which simulates a drum, and you can play on it. Get your hands warm, and I'll play there. And I also take that time to get my uniform straight when there's no one around. Because when everyone's around, it's usually you only have two pressers. It can be stressful. I get my shoes ready. I take as much time as I can when no one's there, and then essentially I warm up, I get ready. We're the last on the bus as Miles directed because we're the first ones off. We get dropped off at a separate point in the cemetery to walk to the quarters, and that's usually a time when I'm starting to feel a little bit more. Low level anxiety about going in. You go in, I try to identify who's going to lay the wreath essentially. And then I go to the back and I stay out everyone's way. I actually have a drum pad and a stand there now at the tomb quarters. They let me keep one, and it's nice. I can just play. I just go in the back and find a mirror and just drum and stay out everyone's way. And eventually, they'll come find me back there, and we'll do a talk through, make sure that we're squared away. And I try to just calm my mind. I try to stay. I don't like to talk too much. You're there also to support the bugler. The buglers are in their own version of hell, so if they want to chat, I'll talk to them. Sometimes they're real chatty because they got to get it out. Sometimes they keep to themselves. I see myself as you're their partner, and I'm trying to set them up so that when they blow their first note of taps, they feel like they've had an appropriate amount of time with the muffled ruffles. They know what they can count on. I try to just set them up as well. So checking in on their frame of mind is important. And then essentially, like Miles said, we get into the ready area. You do a last check of your uniform, and then it's tunnel vision time where you're completely focused.